had a little bit of technical issues, but it's all good now. So we have a very special topic that we're going to be touching upon today that I'm sure that will resonate with your hearts and your souls. And we're going to be speaking about trauma. And truly, it's all relative depending on what you have experienced since the moment of your birth, your upbringing, your culture, your beliefs. So we have Josh Perrington here. Let me just get him in. Hey, how are you?
Hey Janet, I'm good. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes. It was crazy. My phone just started taking photos before. So that was a bit traumatic, you know.
That's
And in the light, just to make light of this, but there's nothing light about trauma. It's and but I'm glad that now at 11:05 we're able to connect, and it's so nice to see you. So nice to see you.
that's so good to see you too. Yeah, those little things happen for whatever reason that they happen, right? You just go with it
Totally.
and keep moving on. It's okay.
Exactly. 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 And it's like it's everything in life, that happens to us. It definitely teaches us no matter what. And right now, when I was trying to log on and I couldn't, and it started taking photos, I could have went into a full-blown panic. And I said, you know what, it's okay. The ones that's supposed to show up that are here at this moment in time, they're going to be here, and it's okay. It's this message that we're going to be speaking about today. And I was saying it's very meaningful. It really, I think both of us have gone through our own, levels of trauma. And it's not that we become experts, but it's of the self-actualization, of the realization, and taking action before, because of it takes a great deal of courage. And someone like you, who's a Marine veteran, who is a father of, how many kids? Five, six,
Six. Yeah,
six,
six.
six children, balancing work, life, career, and even, of self-identity and managing of our experiences from childhood and different experiences that perhaps were fated or destiny, or even the choices that we went through. um, the the fact remains very clear that life is not just a straight line. It's like, it's first you do step A, step B, and then you get your reward. That it's these ebbs and flows, and sometimes it hurts. But you being a Marine veteran, I'm sure that even your experience that with other soldiers and people that have served the country, and of all the different roles that they play, I'm sure you've seen firsthand of what happens in that collective consciousness. If you could, speak a little bit about that as well, and about your experience with how you discovered um, your own methods of clearing the trauma that you've gone through.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned that life is not this straight line, right? Like it's not
No.
this thing. If it was, like, it would be pretty boring, right? And when we kind of reframe our conversation around it and say, well, if it was a straight line, it would be boring, which also means if there was no trauma, if there was no baggage in our life, there's no events that happen that are, maybe not wished upon, right? Well, our life would still be kind of boring, right? And it could anyways be that way. I would really challenge people to look at the baggage. This is what I've chosen to do for
Yeah.
myself, to look at the baggage, to look at the, trauma, those type things. And when we say trauma, sometimes it's not really trauma, it's just baggage, right? Trauma really means at a core level, something has been shook up. Either they've been abused, there's, just mental things that have really, latched on and taken control of people as a result of it. And it's really caused them to stop or halt any of the growth that happens in their life because we keep living in that trauma, right? Well, in the Marine Corps, of course, there's plenty of baggage and absolute trauma that people see because you see death, right? A lot of times, or you see people's lives literally change in an instant when they're in battle, or, luckily I didn't, I didn't experience that firsthand. Not every Marine is going to experience that.
Yeah.
And not every, soldier is going to experience that in this lifetime or other lifetimes, right? But I have plenty of friends that deal with PTSD, they deal with depression, they deal with things that have happened as a result of maybe their 4 years or 1 year, or 18 months if they even did, in, a military setting. And I will tell you that the majority of these people, sometimes we don't even understand that there is trauma in our lives. We just, it happens, and our mind kind of blocks it out, or it protects us, right? And then we go about our life living, but we've got this stuff happening back here that we're not even consciously aware of, right? And that's what's been most, I think, freeing probably for me. Even recently in the last, couple of years, and even more recently in the last couple of weeks, just diving into some things and realizing, holy crap, like there's some issues that probably happened at childhood that have affected my entire 40 years of living, all because of these two little events or one event, right? And so I would just really challenge people to, if you have triggers that are happening, if you have this trauma in your life, what would it look like, right? And I'm gently saying this, what would it look like if we gave some form of gratitude towards it and thank it for being there, right? And that's super controversial. It's super difficult to do sometimes. Like, how do we see gratitude in the worst moments of our life? But I'm sure you've heard this too. Like Abraham Hicks talks about the polarity, right? That there's purpose oftentimes in polarity. Without some trauma or without some baggage, do we really have gratitude and understanding for the great things that are in our life? Without the dark, do we really understand and appreciate the light? And there's a piece of me that really wants to fight looking at the gratitude, but there's also the trigger piece of me that says, you know what, if I'm being triggered by showing gratitude for this trauma or baggage, then it might be a doorway for me to dive a little deeper and look at this thing and start, trying to clear it, right? What do you think
No,
about?
exactly, because the controversy may be that, how can I be kind to something that I don't even know it exists? These are things that are, when we experience, and trauma could be in different ways. It could be where there are 4 types, I believe, of certain trauma that we could be, I don't know if we could categorize it, but yet it's something that I feel that is part of our ego. And our ego is the way that we present ourselves to the world, in a sense that has to do with an aspect of our personality. And when our soul, which is the essence of who we are, feels that it's been violated, in a sense, the ego comes out as a soldier to there protect our body. But then there's a subconscious pattern, there's an armor that we build around ourselves for it never to feel that pain again. And there is an interesting book. I didn't finish the whole book. I've been listening, and The Body Keeps Score. And I always recommend books sometimes that I never finish, but it's like, it's so deep. And what I have on, our bodies, what I've uncovered also is through my years of doing hypnotherapy for tens of thousands of clients, that there are certain elements you have to listen to your body. You have to listen to, there's no such thing as all of a sudden. You may get a pain in your chest or anxiety, or you may suddenly feel that you have stomach issues, or you keep on getting migraines. Yes, absolutely. Some things could be that's something, physiological is happening. But your cells hold a memory inside of you of having these specific events, whether it's covert or overt, certain things that you've seen or that you firsthand have experienced. And those four prime wounds that I feel that have to do that are protecting our ego. Number one is abuse. And abuse is mainly, it's like almost like a traumatic expression of somebody else dominating over us, whether it be physical abuse, sexual abuse, mental abuse, emotional abuse, like the narcissist. Another thing is also a form of trauma, could be even a sense of codependency, of feeling that there's like, you have no boundaries. You don't know like whether to let the person in, and it's this like jello kind of thing. It's like really like an attack of your boundaries. And the other form of trauma that I feel that is inside is loss. It's when you've experienced and gone through, let's say, seen physical death, at a very young age, or seen people suffer. That in itself is very traumatic in itself. And like, I remember being a little girl, and I was to more funerals than ever weddings because of my grandparents and so on and so forth. And I remember like being little and saying to my mom, like, I just don't want to die. Like that was my biggest fear of ever fearing, like, and I know it is for so many of children and of adults, of ever feeling or you're seeing somebody that you love suffer. And then the other thing that came up in my meditations this morning is neglect. I never realized that neglect is a form of trauma that gets hidden inside. And neglect is something that may happen even when the parent or the person or your partner or your friend means well, but they're busy doing something else, thinking that they're fulfilling security on one sense. But what people really need more than ever is the feeling of connection. And in order to be able to heal these wounds, these traumatic wounds in different ways that we've experienced, the first thing is compassion and gratitude. And this is controversial that I'm having difficulty with that word.
It's okay.
I'm having controversy with controversial. It's because how do you have compassion towards something that's so hurtful? How do you even know that it exists? But your body will let you know, because it keeps you entrapped thinking that you're safe, when in reality there is a whole world out there that's waiting for you to step in, but heal. And healing takes gratitude that what you've survived, in a sense, that experience.
You're exactly right. Yeah,
Right?
100%. I have a saying that my family probably gets tired of me saying, right? But it's just empathy is the cheat code. If there's a cheat code in games, right? If you're talking to a gamer, there's usually cheat codes that they can, fast forward right into a game. And for me, what I've noticed in my own life is that empathy, compassion, right, is that cheat code. When I can truly empathize with somebody, then I can connect with them and see what's happening through their eyes, right? And when I can really do that, then usually the judgment or the shame or the guilt or any of those negative emotions or unresourceful emotions just fall aside, right? Because I can truly get in their shoes and see, life through their eyes. And, you kind of mentioned it early on that, your body is protecting you. We create this thing, and our mind is meant to truly protect us. It is always trying to predict the future, right? Your mind is, and it will create this environment for you based on just a few events that happened maybe when you were young, right? Because when you're young and you're born, you're fresh, right? You have fresh eyes and you're looking around, and it could be your dad, it could be your mom, brother, sister, friend, kid at, daycare that says one thing to you. And what happens is, because your mind is trying to protect you, it is looking for ways to protect you. So it will say, you know what, this person said I'm fat. And if this person said I'm fat, I must be fat. And so what we do as kids, you've heard this before, we generalize everything. If one person said that, now a kid is going to say, well, everyone thinks I'm fat.
Yeah,
And
therefore I am.
exactly. And
Yep,
so what they've
yep,
done, what they're doing in that moment, and we all do this unconsciously, is we start creating the glasses, the lens that we see the world through. And that's our
certainly.
perspective, right? And so, I've done tons of talks on this before. I've talked to people about this before, but it never really sunk in, like truly sunk in, Janet, until about maybe 2, 3 weeks ago. And I'm having this, you know, moment with my wife, and we weren't necessarily agreeing on things, and we're arguing, and all of a sudden this flash comes in of what her true perspective is, right? Because my argument was, you're not hearing me. Like, do you even, like,
Mm,
are you listening? Because you're not hearing me, right? Well, her argument was the same thing. She's saying, Josh, are you even hearing me? You're not listening. And I'm like, there's no way that we both could not be listening to each other and yet still think that we are, right? So anyway, I had this moment, and I chalk it up to almost a miracle for myself, where I flipped into her perspective, and truly, like, flipped, not just, okay, yeah, I can see where you're coming from, but really everything in my body, the way that my energy felt, everything, I just truly flipped into it. And I attribute that, Janet, to about 4 or 5 days prior to that. I was in a session with a mentor, and we were doing NLP, Neuro-Linguistic Programming, and we went back to an event that was very traumatic for me as a child. And that event has caused me to have a perspective, right, in my life of abandonment. Maybe people don't want me, like, I don't really truly have a home, right? Those type things, rooted in our chakra area, like roots.
yes.
And we started releasing some of that emotion that was surrounding all of that, right? And at the time I was like, wow, this feels really great. I don't know if it's going to work. 4 days later, I have this perspective shift with Katie, my wife, and it was profound, the difference, because I felt rooted and I felt safe and loved and all of that from her perspective. When I flipped back to my perspective, I felt that I was in survival mode, right? Not rooted,
Correct.
complete opposite. And I'm saying all that to say this, that it was a trigger for me, that it felt like she wasn't listening or hearing me. But once I flipped into her perspective and I realized that her brain, her subconscious, has just created the perspective of being rooted and safe and, having a home, because that was the environment she grew up in, right? And so once I realized that, I realized that both of us were 100% correct in what we were saying. We were just literally saying it from two different perspectives. And so our minds create this amazing virtual reality for us, and all we're doing is seeing it through the lens of us at a 4-year-old level. And think about it, we've learned a lot since we were 4 years old, but our mind has kept that generalization and usually has kept those frames around us. So we can't ever really truly, like, live the life that we want to live, move past these things, unless we take these trigger points, we take these trauma or baggage, and really dive in a little deeper and realize, okay, was there an event that happened?
Correct.
And a lot of times we don't remember, right, until we start asking the questions. Was there an event that happened that caused me to see the world through this lens, to put these glasses on, right, in order to protect me? And even though our mind wants to protect us, it's not always our friend, right? Like, our
Right.
mind will cause it. If we want to lose weight, right, our mind will kick in and say, oh no, like, why don't you just sit on the couch, right? Like, it's easier to do that because it's trying to protect us from the pain of maybe going to the gym or all that. We just have to tell our mind to, to obey, right? To sit down.
Exactly. Exactly. And something, our minds are, it's there, like that soldier that's protecting us. But what I want to really focus in is, like, I love how you brought in of, like, the fact that we all see through the lens of our own experiences. And empathy truly is the key that could unlock great healing. But before we go into methods of how people can begin to heal and unpack it, because unpacking it, I truly believe you should be doing it with someone who's a professional as well,
Mm-hmm.
a mentor, someone that can hold space, because there could be things that perhaps you start reliving that experience, even though it isn't physically there, but your body feels those emotions. And that's why people sometimes get into repetitive relationships. They go for the same person or the same career, or it's that hamster in a wheel cycle, not realizing that the repetitive patterns had to do with really of them wanting to be safe. So the first thing is, yes, number one, step one is acknowledging that it existed, because your body will let you know. So it's really scanning the body when that all of a sudden that happens, because when your body's already letting you know, that's a wake-up call that there is something in there that perhaps you're not feeding the spiritual nutrition, Mother Earth food, even fresh oxygen to be outside in nature. And amongst like people that are truly in an environment that is healthy, that want to see you succeed, that want to see you healthy. It's a matter of being selfless, of there's no, feeling a sense of community. And that's what we're building here on Raw Real Talks, is a sense of community. That's what you've built, Sacred Uproar. That's what I'm building on, Janet Namaste, the community. It's all about a feeling of that there's a place of belonging, because that is one of the main things of trauma, is a feeling that you're alone. When there's an abuser and you are the abusee, or it's the person who's getting abused, you feel like there's nobody else in the world nobody will understand. Like, these are things that, I could say it out loud. It's, my father used to hit me when I was younger, it wasn't like physical abuse, but that's what they were like. It was, I was afraid to, like, if I was to look the wrong way or whatever it was like a soldier of some sort. So that caused also as an adult, of not wanting to be seen, or I'm going to get hit, in a sense. Mm-hmm. It's of allowing, being in my own comfort zone. It's physical, but yet the physical turns into mental, and your mind then puts these subconscious programs. So step one, empathy. Step two is gratitude. Am I grateful that I was hit like every day? Or I won't say every day, but a lot, I forgive my father, for he had abuse, and everything like that. But it doesn't make him bad or whatever. This is something that has happened. I'm grateful that I survived, and I could see it through the lens of where he was, and I found compassion. Step three, I find, is self-reflection, which is very traumatic sometimes. It's actually writing down of where you were, in what ways were you traumatized? Was it neglect? Was it abuse? Was it making you depend on something? Of course, when you're 4 years old, you're going to depend on your caretaker. And also of really tuning in to the insight of why you've experienced that event as traumatic. Now that you brought it out to the surface, what is it, that insight through your lens? Are you labeling yourself as a sensitive person? Like, oh, I'm just sensitive. It's okay. So I'm going to keep myself like this. That's another safety. So there are things like, you have to even think about the payoff of trauma. Like, what is the long-term consequence of your experience of this trauma? And when you open these things up, and of course, I always recommend with a professional, with a mentor, with someone that you love and trust. And even it's through simple things of journaling or hypnosis, or I'd love for you to speak about different methods that once people uncover their trauma, of what methods they can use to heal.
Yeah. Well, everything you said, I 100% agree with. It's beautiful when somebody can actually get inside their own skin and get inside and really start looking and poking around, right? Oftentimes we spend 40, 50, 60 years in this spacesuit, right? And we don't really understand like who the driver is. what's happening inside here. And, you know, you were starting to touch on it, but a lot of this trauma or baggage events that happen in our lives, they cause emotions in our lives that we don't know how to process. And so what we do is we trap those emotions. Emotions are not meant to be trapped in our body. And a lot of times that trapped emotion surfaces in some sort of disease, right? Like dis-ease. We're not at ease. Our body is not aligned. So we have things that happen with our, you know, maybe hearts or stomachs or wherever. And you can usually tie it back to events that have happened where we have not released those emotions. And if you don't know how to release those emotions, which most people don't, if you knew how to, you would have released it when you were 4 years old, right? Or 5 or 7 or 27.
Or whenever the event happens, you know.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
But we don't know. And so again, our minds are so amazing. Like, you really are truly a genius. Most people have forgotten how much of a genius you truly are. But, you know, like,
I thought you were talking about me.
I'm talking about you. I am talking
and
about
I'm talking about you.
Yeah, I'm talking about
We're all
you
geniuses.
and the other 288 people watching this right now. Like,
Yeah.
literally, you are all geniuses. And it's because, you know, there's so many things. Like, I'm moving my hand right now. I'm not consciously thinking of moving my hand, right? Your body is doing that for you. Your mind is doing that for you. Your mind will protect you at all costs. Like, it will cause you to stay on the hamster wheel that you talked about.
Yeah.
It will create this new life that you think is new that will end up just resurfacing as your old life if you don't release the emotions. So our minds will pick up evidence all over the place. It's always looking for evidence to support what it believes. So if I believe that, I don't know, if I believe that I'm fat, right? Then my mind is always going to be looking for evidence to support the belief that I'm fat. So it's going to look for comments where maybe Mariama says something like, I don't know, like some comment about, hey, Josh, you look great today. Well, in my mind, I might think she's saying it because she's only saying because I think I'm fat, that now she's going to say something just to make it sound great and try to overcompensate for me thinking that. Anyways, there's going to be all kinds of things like that. Well, our minds are literally always scanning your environment, scanning your conversations to try to find evidence to support it. Once we realize that, and we realize that there are certain emotions that get trapped in our body that does not need to stay there, then we can start the process of releasing the emotions, releasing the baggage. It doesn't mean the event never happened. It doesn't mean the trauma never happened. It just means that we can release that emotion around it. When we release the emotion around it, then you're free. Then you start breaking the cycle, and then you can start creating a new cycle. So we do that through what's called NLP, Neuro-Linguistic Programming.
Tell us more about NLP, and then I'll speak about the other methods that I'm so intrigued by NLP and EMDR, but yes.
NLP is, it's the short word for me is just miracle. Like, it's amazing. So it was developed, I don't know, 30, 40 years ago, I guess, by two guys. And what they did was they saw that there was success happening in certain people, and they wanted to know, could you model success, right? So it was literally created to model somebody else's success. Well, then it's morphed into this whole other category of, if I can model their success in, say, business, well, then I could probably model their success in relationships and all these things. And then the deeper neuroscience started to do research, and they started gathering more information. And over the years now, we've realized that, and Joe Dispenza talks a lot about this, that, these neural pathways in our brain are amazing. They're like roadmaps to your future, right? Based on past events. And so what will happen is, we'll have this event, and it will hardwire some, thing in our brain that this is the way life is. Well, unless you take time to rewire that piece, neuro-linguistic program is just the language of the brain, right? Neuro is, you can reprogram it to believe a brand new truth for you. So if you don't believe that maybe you grew up in a very poor home, and you may not realize it. Maybe your parents have always said things like, you're going to be great one day, things like that. But deep down on a subconscious level, because you saw lack your entire, you know, early stages of childhood, adolescence, that's what's programmed in your brain, right? Well, there are exercises that we can do through NLP, Neuro-Linguistic Programming, that will allow that person to map a new future. Because again, if you ever want to figure out what your future is going to look like, you can literally take your past, pick it up, and just put it right on the future, because your brain and your reality is going to be created based on those past events.
Correct.
Unless we're intentionally creating the new future through our mind. And so when we close our eyes, if everybody does this, if you close your eyes and you start thinking and you take a deep breath and you smell coffee, right? Like you can smell coffee in your mind, and you start thinking, well, if I use creamer, maybe you put the hazelnut creamer in it, right? Maybe next to it, you're smelling Cinnabon, you know, cinnamon, the buns, right? The muffins. Immediately what happens is our mouth starts watering because it's preparing to eat that food, but the food doesn't exist, right? So just like the food doesn't exist, our minds will create it in ourselves to believe that the food is there. It will start preparing the body to consume that food and digest it, right? Even though the food doesn't exist, it's not here in front of us. Your future is the same way. If you start releasing the emotional baggage that we have, once you release that, now you're free. But once you're free, what do? Do you go back to the old patterns? No. Once you're free, we start mapping a new future. And when you map the new future, it's maybe I feel fit. Maybe I feel like I'm traveling a lot more, and maybe I feel less guilty or shameful. Maybe I feel like I'm being judged less, right? Whatever these things are that are in our lives, we can map a future based on it. And because our minds are truly that genius, and you are truly that genius, you can map it and it will find its way there. You just get out of the way. And so we've heard the cliche things about, oh, law of attraction, like all these things, right? Well, that's essentially how law of attraction works. You have to release the past emotion.
That's the key. That's
it really is
releasing, because if you don't release, and you can have 100 billion vision boards and you're wondering why it isn't happening, but that's because there's only a certain amount of compartments that are in your neural pathways. So if there's something there that's holding real estate in your body, the manifestation of your beautiful desires and what you've always loved and wanted is not going to happen.
Yeah.
So the key is the release, 100%.
Absolutely. And so like I look at it for my own marriage. You know, Katie and I are on a path now that is like the path that I've dreamed of, right? Like it's what I've wanted. Aww. And our relationship has always been pretty good, right? But we hit like if I'm just being raw, real talks, right? For the past, 6 months, like it caused us to really do some reflection, and it was a little scary because we had this like tension happening. And so that was just recreating a past and bringing it to the future. Well, then once I released some of this emotional baggage around the other thing of maybe feeling abandoned and all these things, it started giving me a new perspective. Well, that new perspective caused me to drop in to Katie's perspective in our disagreement or argument, and it solved everything. Immediately, I was able to smile and say, essentially, holy shit, like you're right. And I'm also right. And because we're both right, like we do truly care about each other. And so we started moving on a path, and now we're mapping a new future of us being together, a super, healthy family, vibrant family, the family that we've always dreamed of, right? Those type of things. I don't think that would have happened, Janet, had I not spent the time. And it could have happened. Maybe if she would have spent time too, right? Doing the same thing. But if I wouldn't have spent the time with my guy, having a professional talk to me about past baggage, release that stuff, and then move forward in the new future. Like if it wouldn't have happened, we wouldn't be on this path, and we wouldn't be creating a new future.
Exactly. And NLP, it's so interesting. It's like the first thing is learning to recognize your emotions, because everything that we've seen, we've heard, we tasted, all of these like 5 senses, they are stored somewhere in our body. Everything that we've ever physically have experienced, it's stored in there. in our body. So the first thing of really learning to recognize where that emotion lives. The second thing is identifying identifying what it is as you as an individual, what you need, and how you can have the support so other people can meet you, whether it be a therapist, and like I mentioned, with different people that are professionals. But the other things that I realized with the methods is NLP, which is wonderful that you were speaking about, EMDR. EMDR it reprograms also your mind, and restructures your future as well by putting your when you're about to go to sleep, your brainwaves go into this, like you're in beta when you're like wide awake, and then you're about to go to sleep, and it goes into this like alpha, and then theta, and then delta, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in between that alpha and theta, I've been doing hypnotherapy for almost 2 decades. That's pretty crazy, right? Like 2 decades. And as a hypnotherapist, we go into that route in a very compassionate, secure way. And it's not about planting seeds. It's helping people remove in the most gentle way, and then put on and almost like replacing the negative thoughts and repetitive pattern into something positive. And that's the same thing with EMDR, is the way your eyes move when you're in REM sleep. You know, when we're in REM sleep, when you close your eyes, it goes, you know, we're kind of like left, right, left, right. You know when someone's in a deep sleep because their eyes are flickering in a sense. And during that moment in time is a place where your subconscious, that's the way that, hi, Lori, that's, this is from my past life when I was a web developer at iVillage.com. Lori's an amazing artist. So when we tap into our subconscious through EMDR, what it is that you get to reprogram. Also, it's like you're awake, yet your eyes are going back and forth, either watching the therapist like a finger or something on the screen, like as if you're watching a tennis match. And it puts you into this balance of where you are sort of in a REM, but you're not, and you're awake, and where you focus in and of the incident, and then you replace it. Now, I'm not an EMDR practitioner, but I know of some that it really is wonderful. Hypnotherapy is amazing. Regression therapy, of going back to the root. And sometimes when you go back to the roots from an objective point of view, where you're not really in it, you're looking at it from the lens of a vantage point, then you're able to resolve it in a matter of the advice that you would give to someone that you really care and trust. The other thing that I know that worked for me, and mind you, there's no one size fits all, is yoga, or moving your body, whether it's through Zumba, whether it's through, but moving, you know, for me, I have to do Kundalini every morning. I don't have to, I desire it. My body yearns it. It's filling up my lungs with oxygen. It's like allowing the flow of purity to come in. So when we move our bodies, there are things that are get stuck in our chakras, in our first or second or third, wherever it is, that we hold in, that can get released. And sometimes it takes, like, I remember when I first started yoga, and I would come home, and James would tell me, James is my husband, everyone, for those that you don't know. James would tell me, you just went to yoga. You come home, you're so angry. This is angry yoga. Where are you going? You're so
I can
angry.
hear him say that. Yeah.
Like, he's like, where are you going? But what it did in the beginning, like, it would bring up emotions that I wanted to come home and like freaking tackle him, you know, of like, you know, it's, and he didn't even do anything, because that's another method. Our body stores these emotions, these traumatic events of what we may perceive, and what we perceive to be traumatic, the other person may think, what are you, crazy? Or with somebody like that, you know, what I may think is not a big deal, or is a big deal, and the other person who actually experienced it may not believe so. So whatever belongs to you is sacred. But those are my particular methods that I would, and obviously psychotherapy, if you do need, we're not doctors, Josh and I, we're just, practitioners. And, but if you do need whatever it is, it's, that's not our forte, but definitely, like you started yoga also, you were a little bit, it was tough in the beginning, right?
Yeah. Well, it's just the stigma around it, right? For
Totally.
guys, right? Like it's
Yeah.
in a guy's world, yoga is like for girls. And that's
Right.
not accurate at all, right? That's just our perspective sometimes. And but what you said was 100% correct in that, you're releasing emotions by moving. It's really difficult for something to stay stagnant, stuck inside your body if you're continuously moving it, right? If you're trying to actively move those emotions through. And it's just really powerful. I would just say, for people that are listening to this today and thinking that, my life is really kind of all together. It might be, and I really hope it is. I so hope it is. I would just ask you gently to look at some of the triggers that happen in your life, So if it's conversations around, we'll just rip the Band-Aid off, right? If it's conversations around, say, abortion or vaccines or any of these things that cause triggers and cause our hearts to kind of flutter and like our blood pressure rise a little bit, those are triggers because those are our belief systems. And people start they start questioning our belief system. Well, our belief system, right, was created as a child and through our events as a child, and then we just carried them forward. And so I believe, right, that everybody has and is warranted to their own perspective. What I would really love to see is, a world where we have been trained to take our glasses off and put a new set of glasses on just to see this other world. Doesn't mean you have to keep those other glasses on. I'm not asking people to change as a person. It's just, what if we could just change the screen sometimes? So I would challenge people today to kind of do some of that, right? Look at their own life. What is it that triggers them? What posts do they see as they're going through Instagram that's like, oh, this really like gets me going? Well, maybe dive deeper into it and find, is there another perspective that we might be missing?
If there is something that gives you that emotional charge, there means that there's something inside of you that needs to be not cleared away right away. Like let's
addressed
clear
at least.
Address because it's there. It's been neglected. It's hiding under different compartments. And if we just look at our bodies as these emotions like little children, and some are very attention seeking and others have hidden themselves in places where under layers and layers and layers. But this is something that is important. In order to go forward, we have to go backwards, and through reverence, through acceptance, through compassion and empathy. And I thank you, Josh. We went a little bit over, but I could speak for hours with you. And I thank you for this. And really, if someone wants to actually, and this is not, we're not plugging anything or whatever, this is all just like, if someone wants to connect with you for an NLP session to kind of delve deeper into certain trauma, how can they contact you? Could it be through Instagram?
Yeah.
What is the best way?
I would just say the best, easiest way right now is just through Instagram. Just do it on this account, the sacred.uproar that's attached here. I'm willing to, anybody that writes me today and says, Josh, like this was an epiphany, like there's some triggers that are happening, right? Like I'll give you a session for free. Like, let's just talk. Let's just have a conversation, right?
You're so good.
Because I feel like for me, this is like a life's work, and I want to leave this planet in a really amazing spot. I want my kids to grow up in an environment that everybody has different glasses to wear, right?
Yeah.
And that they want to put those on.
Thank you.
So yeah, just shoot me a DM on Sacred Uproar and let me know.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. I'm so grateful for that. Thank you for offering that for our viewers. And also, I too am offering every first Thursday of the month. It's called the Monthly Vibe. And if you tune in to, you could just register on either Raw Real Talks or on Janet Namaste on Instagram. And It's going to be this Thursday at 7 p.m. And at the end of the month, I'm also going to be doing, I believe it's the second Tuesday in the last week of December. I'll put that out there. It's going to be an event of really tuning in and healing trauma and tuning into mindfulness and meditation and other tools. So, Josh, always a pleasure. And thank you for sharing your tips, your time, and your wisdom. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.